kids are in bed. It's the WPIAL Blitz show. How about that? Bruce Badgley, as you can tell, still recovering from 3 days, out in the elements, covering the state football championships. And there's my good buddy, Ian McMeans. And it's a look back on the 2025 season that went so very fast, my friend.
It really did. And I think, it's only the second weekend of December here, and we're already done with high school football. And it goes back to how early Labor Day was. And I think this was the earliest in August there were ever football games in Pennsylvania. So,
Mhm.
the season started early, it ended early, and now we've got like a couple weeks before Christmas without high school football, which is kind of atypical. There's been seasons where it was like the weekend before Christmas when they were playing the state championship game. So this was just how the calendar fell this year, and it did just fly by.
Yeah, and that seemed to be it seemed to catch a lot of people by surprise.
Hmm.
Even with the fact of, district championships being before Thanksgiving. I mean, historically it's always been, over Thanksgiving weekend, and Thanksgiving was early this year.
It
So,
was.
so it just kind of shows, I mean, the clock is kind of accelerated. Not that I disagree with it. I think that getting the games over, early in December. If we let it go any further, I'm looking at the weather out this way this upcoming week. I mean, the temperatures are going to reach 40 degrees and that, and we still want these players and teams an ability to, kind of play the way that they have all year.
Yeah, I'm totally fine with it. Having games that are still in decent enough weather conditions. I know there was some wind and everything else out at Cumberland Valley this weekend, and
Yeah,
temperatures were cold, but it's December too, so there's
sure.
that. But it's not frigid, right? It's not late December. It's still early December. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I was fine with kind of how the season schedule wound up working out. It was weird though, you're right, not having the WPIAL championships like the day after Thanksgiving, because that's
Mhm.
usually, they're usually on a Friday right after Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
But this year it happened, they were the Saturday before Thanksgiving, and then the turf crews had to scramble because Pitt had a home game the next weekend, and then the Steelers played. So it was it's
Yeah.
going to be interesting to see how everything kind of plays out with the NFL's new directive about turf conditions too. So that's something to keep an eye on for those future negotiations as far as how the WPIAL and Heinz/Acrisure Stadium handle their site locations for championship games. But it was a good year. We had two WPIAL teams win state titles this year, getting back on top after last year was the first time since I think 1995 that the WPIAL didn't win or 94 that the
Mhm.
WPIAL didn't win a state title. So the WPIAL got two this year and had a pretty good showing in the other one. So you want to get rolling and we'll go through some things
Yeah,
and
I
then
just
you can kind of talk about each game that you were at individually.
right. And I just, before we get too far here, I just want to thank all the people that had such kind words about the show. When I was out there, it was quite humbling. All the, the comments or whatever like that. A couple guys were commenting on the fact that how did I stay out on the deck for 2 hours and I'd have to go to the bathroom,
That's a valid question.
that is the right, the burning question. But thanks to everybody who had kind words to say. That means a lot to both Ian and myself. We do this for the love of the game, and it obviously is resonating with a lot of the coaches and fans. And that's just we want to I personally just want to thank everybody, for all the kind words. And all right, let's get started.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. We definitely really appreciate everyone who's tuned in, watched the show either live or later on. And, the folks in the chat who ask us questions every week, feel free to, shout things out if you want to this week as well. So this is, as Bruce mentioned, our 2025 wrap-up edition, the season recap edition of the WPIAL Blitz show. Celebrating not only our WPIAL champions and state champions, but we've got some other special things coming later in the show as well.
Ooh.
Yes. So,
How about always something special from you, my man? I mean, and before we get too far, I mean, all the brains and everything, behind this show is Ian there. He just does a wonderful job in putting all of this stuff together each and every week. And I tell you what, it's amazing that I would be watching the show if I wasn't on the show. So
Well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. It is certainly a labor of love. And we do our best to be, I think, as we say, entertaining and informative. So that's the sort of,
yes, we do.
needle that we're trying to thread here is entertaining and informative. And hopefully we've, achieved that for everyone who tunes in and
I think
enjoys the
so.
show. So if you obviously know where to find us on YouTube and can follow us on our social media accounts. And thanks to everyone that, interacted with us on social media as well this year, as well as those that checked out my articles on steelcityblitz.com. I will have more coming in the off season as well. Some, analysis of potential WPIAL conferences since this is a realignment year, and then also some discussion of, I guess I'll spoil what's coming later in the show, some of the top programs of the sixth classification era, since this was the 10th season of the sixth class era. So worth kind of taking a look back at the last decade as
Yeah.
well.
Hey, listen, before we get too far, got a great chat thing from Gary Mullen about the BG Clareton game.
Yes.
And Gary, hey, right on, man. I mean, he took me to task about the fact that I thought that the experience of Bishop Guilfoyle was going to be important in that game, and obviously Coach Wade and the Bears, made me look bad, but hey, good stuff. But Gary, thanks for the comment. Hey, anytime I say something and it's wrong, hey, on this show, take me to task.
Yeah, I mean, I've been wrong about plenty of things, and anytime you make predictions, that's the danger of it, right? That,
Sure.
it's you.
At least we've got the guts to make predictions. There are some people that don't.
Yeah, I think we make strategic predictions though throughout the year, right? Because we don't pick like every game all the time, but
that is
strategically we pick some.
that is
Um,
correct. That
yeah.
is correct. And I'm sure that you're gonna let me know all of my bad ones this week. So
I mentioned a couple on Twitter. It's
exactly.
all
Yes, you
good.
did. All right. All right.
So, as we said, Clairton was not only the WPIAL champion for the first time since 2019, but won their first state title since 2012, which was part of those four straight state championship games. So, Bruce, you were there on the field. Why don't you talk a little bit about the Clairton Guilfoyle game?
It was immediately in this game. It just looked like Bishop Guilfoyle was running in sand, and Clairton was, had no problems. You could see the speed and athleticism was going to be a problem for Bishop Guilfoyle, and which proved to be the case, all game long. A little later on this week, I'll put some links up to my interview that I got to Coach Wade, and he was quite gracious, at the end there, and talked about the fact of how much it meant to the community, this win. And that was my biggest takeaway was the athleticism that the Bears demonstrated on that field was incredible, and then the gracious ending there with the Coach Wade. I'll have that interview out here in a day or so. I mean, I did that for Penn Live, so we'll get that off there. I was very fortunate. If there was somebody else who got on the field interviews with all six state championship coaches during the weekend, I'd like to know who it was besides me, because I don't think there was anybody that got all six. So that was a very special memory too.
Yeah, that's really cool. And for Clairton, I mean, this season started with them opening a brand new stadium, Tyler Boyd Stadium there in Clairton. That's all new turf field, replacing their old grass stadium, new grandstands, all that. So starting the season with opening a new field and putting the cherry on top of winning not only a WPIAL title, but their first state title since Tyler Boyd was there. So,
Yeah.
what a great storyline this was. And I know the folks in the chat were taking you to task a little bit for your comments on Clairton, but really, if you want to take someone to task, take Dave Micah to task because he said he was talking about how good Bishop Guilfoyle's defense was
Yeah.
throughout the playoffs, and I said, don't sleep on Clareton and their 9 shutouts this year, or 10 shutouts, whatever it was. And I think they held Bishop Guilfoyle to what, -1 rushing yards?
Yeah, it was negative yardage. I mean, I thought I heard a -3. I mean, I didn't get this. I mean, it was nice because we could see, the live stats right on the field there, and which is kudos to the PIAA for that. That's just tremendous. But I think it was -3 is what I remember.
Okay, and I think I remember hearing that was the third fewest rushing yards in a state championship game. So, it was Clareton's defense that we had talked about all year on the show of how good that Clareton defense was, showing out once again, taking down the evil empire. And I can call them that because I've seen them call themselves that on,
Hmm.
Facebook and other social media sites. But what a great season for Clareton too, right? Their defense coming up big when they had to in the WPIAL championship game and stopping Laurel's 2-point conversion that sealed the deal there, and then just an utter domination of Guilfoyle after shutting out Greenville in the semifinals too. So
Sure.
great season for Clareton. Great to see them back on top. Great for the community. So our WPIAL 1A player of the year is sophomore Brandon Murphy from Clareton, who I can't name a position because he does everything, right? He
Yeah.
does some running back stuff. He was one of their leading receivers. Returned 2 punts for touchdowns this year. Had a pick six, multiple interceptions and sacks on defense. Tons of tackles from his linebacker spot, and he's only a sophomore, right? I mean, you saw him on the field, and for how good that whole Clareton team was between Dion Lovelace Pompey and Michael Ruffin and Dante Wright and all the other Tavaz Armstrong in the trenches, like Murphy just stands above all those guys too as being the straw that stirs the drink on really both sides of the ball for them.
Yeah, no question about it. And again, going back to the coaching or whatever like that, I thought they had a tremendous game plan, you know, on the offensive side as well to really make that defense work. I mean, that defense is most effective when they're playing from in front. And they got out in front and just kind of put their foot on the neck of Guilfoyle.
Yep. And so some other honorable mentions for our players of the year. Obviously, Clareton's defense is our unit of the year because they were just, I mean, 10 shutouts in what, 15 games,
Yeah.
14 games because they had
I
that.
coach corrected me in the interview. I said 9, and he said no, 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 we had 10. So
Yeah. Well, they also had Shady Side forfeit against them too. So if Shady
okay,
Side had played them, it might have been 11. Let's not forget that Shady Side, a 2A team, was scared to play this Clareton team,
yeah.
and that's just how good Clareton was. Some other, honorable mentions for top players. Matt Sieg concluded his wonderful career at Fort Cherry, now off to West Virginia after flipping his commitment. Ben Hayes from Bentworth was the WPIAL's leading rusher, and carried Bentworth back into the playoffs and almost won them the conference title. Jeff Thompson, Clareton's star quarterback, threw for a ton of yards this year. Colton Carlson, the kind of slot back from Laurel, who did a little bit of everything, rushing and receiving and defense. Great season for him. DeMar Olds and Samir Crosby from Bishop Canevin and Greensburg Central Catholic. We talked a lot about them, especially early in the playoffs when both of them had to step in at quarterback for their respective teams after playing wide receiver most of the year. Tim Andersey from Leechburg was among the WPIAL's leading rushers all season. Tavaz Armstrong from Clareton's an absolute monster in the trenches. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I was listening to Clareton games this year on radio broadcasts, and like you just kept hearing his name over and over and over again. And even in the state championship game, right? Like he just clogged up the middle of the line and was just dominant in the trenches.
We're gonna have to figure out how we could get those things on TV or live stream. If you're listening to the radio, actually, I made a contact with a guy out there, so we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be fun. I like when, and often it's, I have a lot of kids and I'm often driving them around. So usually
Sure.
it's, I'm listening to games either on my phone or on the radio in the car or something like that, that it's, there may be a video broadcast, but I'm not really in a position to be able
Yeah, right. To be looking at
to
the
look at
game,
the
right?
right, exactly. So yeah. And then our WPIAL 1A game of the year was the quarterfinal game, which was the first time Clairton gave up points to a 1A team all year. They gave up, 19 in week 0 against Amani Christian, who was a WPIAL runner-up in 3A, and then shut everyone else out until the quarterfinals in a rematch with their rivals, Jeanette. And Jeanette scored a field goal early, and it was like, oh, Clairton gave up points, ha ha ha, look at this. And then Jeanette just kept scoring and scoring and scoring. And Jeanette had some fantastic players this year too, with Kimon Brown and their wide receiver Jace Powell as well. And Jeanette gave Clairton everything they could handle, and they were the closest team to Clairton other than Laurel of anyone all year. So it was just a fantastic back and forth game. And I chose this one over the WPIAL championship because the WPIAL title game was an 8-6 defensive struggle, which was a good game, but like this one was back and forth. So this
Yeah,
was
very
my
compelling game.
exactly. This was the game of the year, and kind of shows just how close, Clairton came to getting bounced in the quarterfinals, and then they go on a run all the way and win the state title. So congratulations to the Bears and to Brandon Murphy, our WPIAL 1A player of the year. On to 2A, where Seton LaSalle won their first WPIAL title in 21 years, and then promptly got bounced by Farrell in the state playoffs, who then got run all over by Southern Columbia. And from what I could tell of this game, it seemed a lot like just another typical Southern Columbia performance in a state title game where they ran the ball, got a couple turnovers, and just put the other team away.
It, exactly right. I'll be honest with you. I've seen a lot of these Southern Columbia championships. I never saw Southern Columbia look so precise in their execution of their offense. It was a thing of beauty to watch. And Yeah, that was the thing that amazed me. Look, Farrell. After Southern Columbia scored the first touchdown, Farrell returned the kick for a score, and you're thinking, wow, this is going to be one heck of a game. But all Southern Columbia did was say, not so fast, my friends, and proceeded to just dominate this game physically. And when you looked at Farrell, I mean, there were some great athletes out on that field, and you know what? They got dominated by a very fundamentally strong, very physical football team, and Southern Columbia was definitely the undersized team, on those games. So it was a thing of beauty to watch. And later this week you'll see my interview with Coach Roth post game there. When we were the last two guys out on the field because there's so many people that want to talk to him, but he's always so gracious, and gave me, all the time that I needed. Here, his team and everybody is, celebrating or whatever like that. And him and I are the only ones standing out on the field doing like an interview. So um, he's a great man, and you can see why he's a great coach by how that team performed against Farrell.
All right. And so our WPIAL player of the year was Steel Valley running back Duron Barksdale. And I picked Duron Barksdale for a few reasons. One, he pretty much single-handedly, when Steel Valley was in a bad spot in the middle of the season, put the team on his shoulders and carried them all the way to the WPIAL championship game. And for Seton LaSalle, who won the WPIAL title, they did it with a number of players. It was a true team effort for Seton LaSalle. They had a few, star players on the team. Their running back Kamar Freeman had over 1,000 yards. Kia Jones stepped in at quarterback midseason and showed some dual threat abilities. Both those guys are only sophomores, so they'll be back. Their pair of outside linebackers, Will Martin and Aaron Loritz, both were really dominant on the defensive side of the ball, and did some things on offense too. A big play here, a big play there. Martin had those 3 touchdowns in the WPIAL title game out of the Wildcat offense. But Duron Barksdale single-handedly carried Steel Valley to the WPIAL title game. And to me, that's something that deserves Player of the Year of award. So congratulations to Duran and Steel Valley making it to the title game. Seton LaSalle was your WPIAL champions. Seton's defense was really good this year. 3 shutouts overall. They gave up a lot of points to North Catholic in week 0 and then to Farrell in the state playoffs. But against WPIAL opponents, they only gave up like 8.5 points a game against WPIAL 2A opponents. So Seton was really good at their level, a very deserving champion. But their semifinal game against Washington, they got all they could handle in that game. And, Washington was up 19-12 at halftime. Seton scored to go up 20-19. And Washington had, I think, 4 fumbles in the red zone that Seton recovered that, every time Washington got the ball, they'd drive it down the field and Seton would just lock down right at the key moment. And then Seton hit a long pass play to basically put the game on ice at the end of the fourth quarter. But 27-19 is not indicative of how close that game was because Washington gave Seton everything they could handle in that semifinal game. And, their dual threat quarterback, Tristan Reed, Washington had some other very good players. Really some all around great performances in 2A this year. Drew Cook for South Allegheny, Wyatt Sparbani for Western Beaver, who was the Midwestern Conference champions. And then Jaden McCray from Apollo Ridge, who split and actually the conference title with South Allegheny and Steel Valley in the Allegheny Conference after Apollo Ridge beat Steel Valley in the middle of the season. So a lot of really good performances this year. But overall, defense wins championships. And I think that's my big takeaway from this whole WPIAL season was the teams with the best defenses were the ones that won the titles. And it may not necessarily have been the best statistical defense of who gave up the fewest points because, sometimes points are scored against second string guys and things like that. But it was, the teams that were able to have the best execution on defense overall were the ones that won titles.
Yeah, and I think it's great that that we're doing the retrospective here because we, with the most recent item being the championships in our mind, I think maybe we lost sight of the fact of what a great season Seton LaSalle had, and that's why we're putting the show together is so that it is a retrospect. You're really focusing about these teams and what they did in the WPIAL this season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean there was a lot of great storylines in 2A this year with, South Allegheny and Western Beaver winning conference titles for the first time in a very long time. And this was a year where it felt like 2A was wide open and Seton after they lost that week 0 game kind of flew under the radar for a little while.
Yeah.
And then, had some dominant performances against some of the, I'll say, bottom feeder teams from their conference. And then it wasn't really until late in the year when they beat Washington for the conference title the last week, and South Allegheny lost that week to Steel Valley after South A had been undefeated, and then everyone was kind of like, "Oh, Seton's the #1 seed again. Here they go again," and made it back to the championship game, got all they could handle from Washington in the semis, but made it back and beat Steel Valley 21-14 in the WPIAL title game, and another game where Seton gave up 14 points in the first minute coming out of halftime and really had to lock it down on defense and just battle back the whole rest of the second half and win the game.
Yeah, absolutely. All right.
All right, on to 3A, where Avonworth won their second straight WPIAL title and then went on to win the state title. And for those who watched the show last week and we did our state championship predictions, I threw out score predictions because I couldn't help myself. I think I picked Avonworth 31-14 over Northwestern Lehigh.
You're texting me this during the game. I mean,
I did. You're right. I did text you during the game. Yep. And everyone else said it was going to be a close game and a rematch. And I think I took all of you by surprise when I said Avonworth was going to rout them. And I said, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but just, we're talking about, the season as a whole. I believe I said that, the emergence of wide receiver Jaden Jones was the real game changer for Avonworth this season because he's only a sophomore. And him stepping into the offense added a new dynamic that they didn't have last year. And I think he set a state championship record for receiving yards in this game.
yeah, and the other thing is Luca Neal was just,
The dude's
he's such the
outstanding.
heart and soul of this team. And but they were so physical, and I think too, Northwestern Lehigh, they lost a lot from last year's team, and I think that that really was evident, in this game. But the one thing that I would like to share regarding this game between Avonworth and Northwest Lehigh is I witnessed something that in the 15 years that I've been covering all of the state championships in Pennsylvania, I've never seen a losing coach come out on the field to congratulate the winner following the game. I mean, obviously they shake hands in the middle and then they go off. But Josh Snyder from Northwestern Lehigh made it a point to come out and talk with Duke Joncourt after the game, and it was fascinating. I had just finished. I thankfully Duke got me a little bit early for my interview, and I was just kind of hanging out on the field. I'm going, "Hey, that's Josh Snyder." Go over there. The two of them are just talking. They're going through the game and they're talking about matchups and anything. I have never seen that before in a state championship game. Kudos to Josh Snyder for going out there and the sportsmanship that he showed on the field there in the state championship. Unprecedented.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I think, if anyone can kind of appreciate what Avonworth's been through, right? Because Northwestern Lehigh
Yeah,
lost in the state title game to Bell Vernon the year before, and then came back and won against Avonworth last year. So kind of, and that was their first state title in school history. So kind of a similar story, right? Avonworth lost to Northwestern Lehigh in the state title game last year and then won this year. So, from his experience, having done that, the prior year, I think, if anyone can kind of appreciate the journey, it's probably Josh. But that's awesome bit of sportsmanship there. And everything I've ever heard about him is he's a great coach, great mentor, great leader of young men. And we had Coach John Core on the show earlier this year, and what a humble and gracious guy he is too. Like, and his dad was a coach back at Churchill High School before they merged into Woodland Hills, and just a great football family. And I think he had his dad, and I think his son's on his staff too. So, just
yeah.
an all around, like, just awesome for Avonworth and the John Core family to be able to add a state championship to their repertoire.
Uh,
And
the, the one
yeah, go
thing that
ahead.
I learned, this year is just how special a group it is, and I mean the love and affection and the camaraderie. Just, I mean, you could just feel it
Hmm.
around that team, and that's what the other thing that I got out of this game as well.
Yeah. And this is really an Avonworth program that's built themselves up over the last decade or so, that, they were a 1A team, a single A team at the end of the six classification era. And then, they got placed in, or sorry, at the end of the four class era, beginning of the six class era, they were placed in 2A. 2019, they won the WPIAL title in 2A, which was the first championship for them in, 60 years. And then go on and get moved up to 3A because they're a growing community, and it wasn't, they didn't get forced up by the success formula. It was just enrollment was growing, and they moved up to 3A. And then four straight WPIAL championship games that, honestly, if Bell Vernon hadn't like fallen two students below the line and had to move down to 3A for those 2 years, like, Avonworth lost to Bell Vernon in those two championship games. So we could be talking about Avonworth as being, four-time WPIAL champions here. And Coach John Core's done a great job building up their program. And, and you mentioned Luca Neal, who is our WPIAL Player of the Year in 3A. So congratulations to Luca. And I think that was another kind of change from last year, that last year, Luca and his older brother Nico were kind of both playing running back for Avonworth. And this year they moved him into the slot and we're using him as a receiver and a rusher. And that dynamic of being able to put an explosive playmaker like that in the slot, plus everything he does on defense for them, was really a game changer for Avonworth. And their defense, I know I mentioned this before, but no team scored more than 10 points against their first team defense. Overall, only allowing 9.5 points per game all year. But some other really good players this year in 3A. Gabe Jenkins from Amani Christian, Carson Bellinger and Jaden Jones from Avonworth. We talked about them earlier. Joey Felitsky, who is the WPIAL's leading passer. Oh, sorry, I mean Gabe Jenkins from Amani was a 1,000 club member. 1,000 passing, 1,000 rushing yards. Ryan Messina capped off a great career at Elizabeth Forward. Amos Glenn from Freeport was I think he was third in the WPIAL in scoring. And then, the name to watch coming forward here is James Armstrong, the sophomore quarterback from Hopewell. He had an injury midseason, but he put up a ton of yards both in the air and on the ground. And that Beaver Hopewell game early in the year was just a back and forth, game between, two really talented offenses. That was our game of the year because they just went back and forth all game. Hopewell scored with like a couple seconds left and went for two in the win and didn't make it. But what a great performance there. So congratulations to our 3A WPIAL champions and state champions, as well as our player of the year. And I see that Bob Long is joining us now. So just in time as we move into 4A, and then we'll be getting into 5A and 6A. So I know Bob covers the, Philadelphia Catholic League, specifically LaSalle, who was the 6A champions, but also Cardinal O'Hara lost to the Southern Lehigh team that was the state champions for the first time ever in 4A after they beat Twin Valley, who defeated Aliquippa in the semifinals. So, Bruce, what were your thoughts coming out of this game? Because this was one that we kind of had no idea how to project it between Southern Lehigh and Twin Valley.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, it was pretty amazing. Southern Lehigh and Sean Steckard. I mean, I think he had 301 yards rushing and 4 touchdowns. Incredible performance. One of the greatest performances that individual performances that I've seen since I started covering, um, these championships. And that's the first time this year that really anybody has kind of taken it to Twin Valley on the ground that significantly. Twin Valley didn't give up. In fact, they were leading in this game, in the second quarter, but Southern Lehigh, they never gave up. And Sean Stecker, just an amazing performance. And but I think the thing that really set things up is that Southern Lehigh was able to keep the Twin Valley defense off balance. They were really balanced. They threw the ball as well as ran it with Steckard, and Twin Valley didn't have any answer for that.
Yeah, and I think that was something that we kind of debated on our preview show last week was, can Twin Valley control it on the ground? What's going to happen if they get behind? And we saw Southern Lehigh against Cardinal O'Hara in the semifinals do it through the air. I think they had 3 passing touchdowns pretty quick in the first half. And we just weren't sure how the matchups would go, but these state playoff games, when you have never seen a team before, are all about matchups, and you just kind of never know how teams are going to match up until they get on the field with each other. So congrats to Southern Lehigh, first state championship in school history. So always nice to see someone, bring that trophy home for the first time.
Yeah, it is. It was very special to that group. And yeah, what's amazing is that you had 2 state champions from Lehigh County. I mean, that's it. Yeah, that's quite a performance. And Southern Lehigh's only loss was against Northwest Lehigh, the 3A champions, or I mean the 3A runner-up.
Yeah,
So
yeah. And this was something we talked about last week too, was could whoever wins 3A have actually won 4A? And
yeah,
Avonworth smoked Aliquippa earlier this season. And well, maybe not smoked. They had a couple defensive touchdowns in the second, but they beat them pretty handily. And Avonworth also beat Thomas Jefferson, who was last year's 4A champions of the WPIAL. So, we knew this was a really good Avonworth team that could compete with, the best 4A teams in the WPIAL. It's kind of a shame that we don't get like one more week where it's like, hey, why don't we get like the 5A 6A champions to go play each other and the 4A 3A champions to go play each other. Well, let's see what
yeah,
happens, right? But unfortunately that won't happen this year. But that's what shows like ours can debate is could Avonworth have beaten Southern Lehigh, which I think they could have given them a game.
yeah, yeah. We'll see. But great season by obviously the Quips, and And our player of the year there, right?
Yeah, our player of the year, Keemon Spell from McKeesport, missed a few games with injury, but you want to talk about a kid basically single-handedly carrying his team to a WPIAL championship game. Spell did it on the ground on kick returns, was absolutely outstanding. A kid with his size, speed, burst, vision is just absolutely special. And Aliquippa was able to slow him down thanks to the work of their linebackers in the WPIAL playoffs. I may have forgotten a couple linebackers on the list here. I meant to circle back and look those up. So sorry if I forgot any of Aliquippa's linebackers. Folks in the chat can let me know. Certainly don't have to be don't have to be quiet about letting me know if I forgot someone. I'll fix it before I tweet stuff out. But Aliquippa's linebackers really were the key to their defense, which carried them to the WPIAL title after they lost 3 games in the regular season. But when we had Aliquippa's coach on, Coach Warfield, he talked about how after they lost to Montour and Newcastle, that they went back and watched the tape and said, we had 30 missed tackles in this game. If we make all those tackles, we don't lose that game. So, the linebackers tackling really made a huge difference against McKeesport, and then, into their run into the state playoffs as well. So, Marcus Council, Aliquippa's quarterback, who was supposedly suffered a season-ending injury. All the major outlets reported it in the middle of the season, came back for the playoffs and led the Quips to a WPIAL title. Tyler Eber, Thomas Jefferson's do-it-all running back. Named to watch in the future here is Marino Graham from Newcastle, who's a freshman dual-threat quarterback, carried Newcastle to the conference title. So definitely keep an eye on him in years to come. JJ Work for Aliquippa, Jonah Williamson from Trinity, who came up just short of the 1,000 club, and then Aiden Yoakum, Mars's running back, who is second in the WPIAL in rushing this season. All
Yeah.
great performances. And the WPIAL quarterfinal game between Newcastle and Montour that came down to a 2-point conversion at the very end of the game with no time left on the clock. Montour scored a touchdown as time expired, went for 2 in the win, and Newcastle stopped them. So, what a game that was for Newcastle to get their first playoff win in a long time.
That was the most incredible game that you could ever ask to see. Was that game? I mean, with basically in a win or go home scenario. I mean, scoring on the last play of the game. I mean, are you kidding me? That's why we migrate to sports, because of games like this.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's talk
Hopefully
5A
Bob will
now.
join us.
Yes. And
Yes.
Good evening, gentlemen.
hi,
How are
Bob.
we?
We're great.
Good. Can we get
Good.
video with you?
Well, I am driving home from a corporate holiday party, so if you're okay with just hearing my voice and seeing the
Yeah.
larger slideshow that Ian's putting on, which is much prettier than my face, then I think we can roll with
Okay.
All right.
that.
So obviously Peters Township won the WPIAL title, fell to Bishop McDevitt in a close game in the state semis, who then lost to a dominant Roman Catholic team in the state championship game. First state title for Roman Catholic. So Bruce and Bob, you both covered this game, so I'll let you talk about how this all went down.
Well, I'll let Bob start, and then I'll fill in where I need to there.
Sure. I see this as, and I saw this early on this year, best Roman Catholic team in the history of the program. It's a program that had Marvin Harrison back in the day, and I think that a lot of credit goes to Rick Preetz, a guy that I have come to really enjoy spending time with. I think he's done a great job for the young men there, and it's been the best statistic I can give you is when he came to the program 7 years ago, he had 30 kids on the roster, and nobody was worried about boundary, non-boundary when it came to Roman Catholic, right? And Rick came in, turned the culture around, and they have a pretty substantial percentage. If you think about total students they have at the school versus the 130 that they have on the football roster, and he's turned it into, the thing to do and the outlet at Roman Catholic, which is, again, saying a lot given their basketball tradition and everything else. Has terrific players, but also has terrific depth. And I found this team early on to be far better than last year's iteration of Roman Catholic football. And and so the result didn't surprise me. And not that Bishop McDevitt wasn't a terrific team. They are, and both these coaches have a ton of respect for one another. They went on Twitter to basically congratulate the other on an amazing season. And I think that is what high school sports is all about. But this Roman Catholic team is special. They can stretch the field sideline to sideline, down the field. They're that team, maybe more so than any team in the state, LaSalle included, even that can go score on any given play at any time, anywhere on the field. And it was a joy to watch them this year.
Yeah, it was a joy to watch them in the championship game. What I enjoyed watching is just the plan that they had. They really never deviated from the plan that they had, and McDevitt really never forced them to deviate from the plan that they had. And their wide receivers won every matchup. I mean, that was key. And Beals was dead on. I mean, he was extremely accurate with his passing. McDevitt put some pressure on him in the pocket, but he hung in there and delivered a lot of great balls.
Yeah, I would jump in as well and just say, you talked about the young man in 4A that had one of the greatest individual performances, that you can remember. I'm going to talk about in both 5A and 6A young men that did similar things. And for Roman Catholic, it was Ian Stead, who was going to play at Temple next year, and just took this game personally, in my opinion, Bruce, right? He was unbelievable defensively, hard hitting, great in coverage, and then offensively plucked everything out of the air and was that safety valve for his quarterback. Combine that with Ashton Roberts, who also is a Temple commit, both of those guys. Casey Keeler, the head coach of Temple, got quite a heist in the last 4 weeks, bringing those two kids over from Roman Catholic. I mean, that's how you recruit the city. And this was one of those teams that I think will go down in history. And there's a new temporary sheriff in town because they're going up to 6A, and that'll get very interesting with St. Joe's Prep, LaSalle, and Roman Catholic all in the red division of the Catholic League. And only one of those three teams will even play in a District 12 final.
That's incredible.
Which
is wild to think about.
Bob, I had two questions I was going to ask you, and that was one of them was, I know both Roman and McDevitt have enough success points to be moved up to 6A. I didn't know if they had the transfers to be moved up. So one of them was going to be, are both of these or one of them moving up? And you just answered that Roman's going to be moving up.
McDevitt for sure, and I think Roman is as well.
Okay. Yeah. So the other question that I had was, I know Roman beat LaSalle during the regular season, but finished in a three-way tie with St. Joe's Prep at the top of the red division of the Philly Catholic League. So who technically was the Philly Catholic League champion then? Like, who won that three-way tie?
Yep. LaSalle won the three-way tie. We actually did the game that determined that three-way tie.
Okay.
The first game that was played was Roman versus LaSalle, and Roman won that game. I believe was 39-36 was the final. It was a 3-point differential. And then LaSalle the very next week went and beat St. Joe's Prep 31-20. And what happened was there was really no, as I understand it, there was really no tiebreaker set up. And so the ADs got together on the Monday after that St. Joe's Prep LaSalle game and determined that they would go by, if it was a three-way tie with 1-1 against the other two, that they would go point differential in those two games.
Mm-hmm.
And so that game occurred, and we were broadcasting the game, put a graphic up on the screen multiple times to indicate that, hey, LaSalle is done in terms of their 3 games, or 2 games against those other clubs. they're +8. So they're +11 against St. Joe's Prep, -3 against Roman Catholic.
Yeah.
St. Joe's Prep was -8 going into that game, and Roman Catholic was +3. So how that worked out was if Roman Catholic won, that's easy. There's no tiebreak. If Roman Catholic lost the game, there was no chance for Roman Catholic to win the three-way tiebreak because they were +3 and below LaSalle's +8. You lose the game, you're obviously going to be lower than that +3. They can't win the tiebreak. So what it really came down to was, could St. Joe's Prep win that game by 20 points or more to get their plus-minus from a -8 to a +12 to beat LaSalle? And early on, it looked like it was going to go that way. It was 14-0 St. Joe's Prep. Roman Catholic had missed 2 deep balls that could have gone for 6, just overthrown. And, well, here we go. St. Joe's Prep's going to win the Catholic League title again. And Roman fought their backsides off, played a great game. Sorry to the St. Joe's Prep folks listening, but, like, in many ways, Roman Catholic really should have won that game. And it came down to a missed extra point in the second overtime period. That led to the win for St. Joe's Prep over Roman Catholic. So LaSalle won the tiebreak and was the Catholic League champ this year.
Wow.
Gotcha. That's good info, because we were discussing that last week on the show and we weren't sure how it all kind of played out. So that's very good follow-up. I'm glad you joined us tonight to give us that.
Of course. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Cool.
And let's not forget Bishop McDevitt in this whole thing here too. I think that they had a fine season. They had to replace an awful lot. And Roman, I think, came in with, I think, a bit more, especially with Beals at quarterback. That was, I think, a big plus that they had. And, I think the experience factor, plus the fact that, they had that, McDevitt had the target on their back all year from Roman Catholic. And that sometimes that's really hard to beat.
Yeah.
I think this was a 6A team in 5A clothing, honestly, is what it was. I mean, I've been doing, Bruce, how long have we been doing state finals, whether broadcasting or covering?
Yeah.
It's as good of a 5A team as I can remember.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, Bruce, to your point, with some of these rematches, that I think we saw that a lot across the board, right? With Roman Catholic beating McDevitt, Avonworth beating Northwestern Lehigh, that, these rematch games, and even, Southern Columbia had played Farrell before. Granted, it was like 20 years ago, 30 years ago. I think it was in the mid-90s, but they had played before. Guilfoyle had played Clairton before. So, a lot of these games, at least in Western Pennsylvania, I'm sure it's the same in the East too, but there's long memories in high school football, and people don't forget, what happened 15, 20 years ago. It might be a different group of kids, but, most likely you've got people still living in the community, maybe even coaching on the team that played in some of those games. So, there's long memories, and people don't forget these things. And I think that definitely did play a factor this year.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so let's run through some WPIAL stuff here in 5A. Our WPIAL Player of the Year was Peters Township quarterback Nolan DeLucia, who had a great season, capping off a fantastic career. I believe he's going to Villanova, so Bob, you'll get to see him out in the Philly area. Kid can spin the ball really well. Yeah. He's a really good quarterback, made some absolutely clutch throws, dropped a couple real nice balls in the bucket down the sideline in the WPIAL title game when they beat Pine Richland. And all season, DeLucia and Peters Township just came up with clutch plays to win. They were in some close games. Their defense played really well. They had 5 shutouts this year, held their WPIAL opponents to just 8 points per game, but they got a tough battle from Moon. Their regular season game against Upper St. Clair was a 24-20 game. They had to come back in the fourth quarter to win that. So Peters Township, this team had that clutch gene this year, and a lot of that was DeLucia's play. So I'm really looking forward to see what he can do at the next level as well. Some other great performances this year in 5A. Aaron Strader, the quarterback from Pine Richland, just a junior, so he'll be back next year. Cole Newpaver, who was a hockey player that Peters Township convinced to come play running back for them this year, never really played football before, and carried them to 3 touchdowns in the WPIAL championship game, and ran for over 1,000 yards this year. Peters' pair of edge rushers who are both going to D1 schools, Reston Lehman and Lucas Shanafelt. One of them's going to Pitt, one of them's going to Stanford. Both of them made big plays throughout the year. Lehman had just a game for the ages in the WPIAL title game, and had some really big plays throughout the playoffs. Scoop Smith, the electric wide receiver from Woodland Hills, who's on his way to Miami of Ohio. Really just dynamic playmaker, one of the best track athletes in the state too. Khalil Taylor, who transferred from Seton LaSalle to Pine Richland this year, did a little bit of everything in the semifinal game. I think Khalil Taylor had, it was quarterfinal game, had 4 touchdowns 4 different ways between, receiving, punt return, kick return, pick six. So just an all-around great player. And he's only a junior, so he'll be back for Pine Richland next year. And then Upper St. Clair's quarterback, Ethan Hellman, who has one of the biggest arms in the WPIAL and was able to throw the ball all over the yard. So some all-around, great players this year in 5A. Peters Township's defense, which was a little bit of an unheralded unit, just because, Peters beat a lot of teams like 35-0, 31-0, 28-7. It wasn't, they didn't put up those dominant, 50, 60 point performances that you see some teams have, but it was just a methodical way of, path to victory this year for Peters Township. And, I think if they had a little bit better field position in that, state semifinal game against McDevitt, because they really got themselves behind the 8 ball with some, bad field position and special teams mistakes in the first half, that I don't know if they could have given, Roman Catholic any better of a game than McDevitt did in the state championship. It probably would have been a very similar result, but they gave McDevitt everything they could handle in the second half. And that game was really a tale of 2 halves. And, it's just kind of a shame that they were backed up so much in the first half that we really didn't get to see how competitive they could be in a full 48 minutes against McDevitt. But that's how the game goes sometimes, and it is what it is. But Peters, hey, Peters winning their second title in school history. Like, I think that, this is noteworthy too, that Peters Township had never even made a WPIAL championship game until 2019. And now they've been to, 6 championship games and in 7 years and won, 2 WPIAL titles. Like, this is huge for the program and the community.
Yeah, and a lot, I talk about emotion a lot in these circumstances. And sometimes these teams, the goals that they set, are maybe below what they actually, get past. And I see so many teams that, get to a certain point and then just don't have anything left in the tank. Now, in this particular, I mean, obviously, after beating Pine Richland, boy, I tell you what, I think that, it came down to maybe they just didn't have enough emotion left in the tank, to get over the top to the state title game. But they still had a tremendous year, and kudos to Peters Township.
Yeah. Well, and
Ian, it's probably not great podcast talk, but and far be it from me to jump into something I don't really have a great understanding of. But my understanding is that Peters Township has become, and was before, but a very desirable place to live, raise a family, etc. And obviously, you have the right coaches in there as well. But I wonder if some of those demographic traits have anything to do with that recent success that you mentioned.
I'll be blatantly honest, because we always are on the show. You're absolutely right. There's been, Peters for a long time was, just outside of Allegheny County into Washington County, was a lot of farmland type area, but there's been a lot of new, very large housing developments there. So yeah, you're spot on about it being a very desirable community. A lot of very wealthy people have moved in there to those large homes. And, when you have wealthy people with a lot of resources, they can, go out and get training for athletes, which I think that's a big thing. I think we've seen over the last 5-10 years in high school football, that the amount of training these kids are getting in the off season, and you have kids coming in as freshmen who are so developed and so far ahead of where freshmen were 15, 20 years ago, that I think the amount of training that some of these players get, and wealthier areas, wealthier families will have more, money to spend on things like that. So I think you do bring up a good point, Bob, that, they have a very good mix here of, coaches and, coaching staff with Coach Plack, who was on our show a few weeks ago. The way he's built that program up, and buy-in from the administration, from the community, and also that perfect combination of being in a wealthy area that they can go out and take part in some of those off-season trainings and things like that too.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Hey, listen, before we get too far, I want to thank Mr. Azul Dose for contributing tonight on the live chat there, Ian. Everybody's saying they like the show, so
And we certainly appreciate, like we
yeah.
said, everyone throughout the year who's tuned in, who watches the show, and everyone who's taken part in the live chat. So thanks everyone for everything that you all do to support our show. We couldn't do this without the fans, because it's really we do it for the fans,
Yeah,
as
that's
much as we
right.
do it for ourselves. My one final thought on 5A, since we talked about potentially both McDevitt and Roman Catholic moving up to 6A, that really creates a vacuum now, a power vacuum statewide, because I don't know if there's any other Philly Catholic League schools in 5A. And I think
the return of Imhotep.
Okay, is Imhotep moving back down? I wasn't sure where they were as far as.
They are. So they're not a Catholic League school, but a District
Right.
12 school from the public league, and they are moving back to 5A.
Okay. So, Imhotep certainly is going to be a factor on the eastern half of the bracket, but I think this does, potentially open up a lot on the western half for, a Peters Township, a Pine Richland, a District 3 champion to now be competitive at the state level too. So I think it's going to be interesting how the next cycle goes.
Yeah, I think it helps District 1 a lot too. I think it helps District 1 a lot, Bob. I mean, we've been talking for years about the fact that there are so many large school teams in District 1 and District 11 that I think that it helps both District 1 and District 11 a lot by the to fill this as you said, Ian, the vacuum in 5A.
Mm-hmm. And I just checked some of the comments in the chat here. So one of the questions was about seeing numbers if classifications were split up a little bit differently. So if you follow me on Twitter at WPIAL Blitz, I did post back when the classifications were released about how the breakdown would look if we still had 4 classes instead of 6. And I'll be doing some more stuff like that as the off season goes on, just for the fun of it, because I love that kind of conference breakdown stuff. So follow me on Twitter, ask me questions there. Happy to interact and talk more about realignment. I've got all the statewide enrollments in a spreadsheet, because of course I do. So I can happy to chat about it, but we don't know for sure where everyone's going to be until the all the success formula stuff comes out and who's going to get forced up and all that. So all right, on to 6A, where Central Catholic was the WPIAL champions. Really a dominant performance all year from Central, and we got to sandwich the year with Central versus LaSalle games, 2 LaSallian education schools after St. Jean Baptiste de LaSalle. Central was very proud of being a LaSallian school, and obviously LaSalle is as well. The state championship game was a little bit more competitive, but in the end it was LaSalle and their star players that were able to pull it off. And I'll let you guys talk about it since you were both there.
Yeah, go ahead, Bob. You and I got together after the game, and we didn't really talk too much. So I will hear your evaluation of it and then chime in.
Special night for LaSalle, starting with the matchup, like you said, Ian, and it's not lip service. It is 100% the grounding principle of LaSalle, and from those I've spoken to it, Central Catholic the same way there. A Christian Brothers education, yes, I'm a little partial, is a very, very special experience, and one that doesn't leave you when you walk out the doors. And so the chance to play in another Christian Brothers school, and LaSalle has taken that opportunity with schools such as Calvert Hall in Baltimore, and Christian Brothers Academy in Northern New Jersey. Those are special and important matchups, and the chance to do it twice a year was terrific. And I'm very hopeful that matchup continues for two schools that I think struggle to find games at times for reasons that we all understand. But all that to say, it was a heck of a game. I was very impressed by Central Catholic. I'm going to give you two keys that, determine the game. The first was with about 5 minutes to go in the second quarter. Chris Black, who's a heck of a running back, ran the ball in for a touchdown to make the score 7-7. LaSalle got the football back with 5 minutes to go in the second quarter in a tie game and gave it back to Central Catholic for the first time with 3 minutes to go in the third quarter, down 21-7. So they drive down and they score at the end of the first half with 7 seconds left. The kick return is, returned, and they don't even get an offensive play to end the half. Then LaSalle gets it to begin the second half and goes 9 minutes down the field, scores on fourth down to make it 21-7. That's a championship type set of drives there.
It's like Bill Belichick always talking about wanting to double up before and after the half. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the game goes haywire with 4 minutes left, and Joey O'Brien has his legacy game. He already had a throwing touchdown on fourth down, a lateral and then a throw to his other wide receiver, Owen Johnson. He had the 99 yards receiving, and then he has 3 consecutive interceptions on 3 of the last 4 possessions of the game. And one of which was taken back for a touchdown, which iced the game. For a young man that's a 5-star going to Notre Dame, only had 1 interception, believe it or not, coming into that game, but played center field when the time required it. And when Central Catholic had to go to the air, he did what he did best, did his best Andrew Jones impression out there in center field, and iced the game. It was, you talked about, again, a performance in 4A. I could throw that performance there up against anybody that I've ever seen in a state final. It was incredible.
Yeah, it was incredible. And for my, when you talk about that third quarter drive, I mean, that 9-minute drive, that touchdown play was on a fourth and goal, and they ran that flea flicker play. And I asked Brett about that, in the post-game interview. I said, I mean, that just exudes confidence. I mean, it's 4th down and 2. If somehow the Central Catholic is able to, stop that play, I mean, LaSalle is basically literally, yeah, right. I mean, it's a 14-7 game with only, a couple 3 minutes remaining in the third quarter. So that was such a huge play, and the confidence level that it showed. I mean, I just couldn't believe it when it happened. But yeah, and then it kind of, as you said, it unraveled after that. But that one play after the 9-minute drive, and that 9-minute drive, there was never any panic. It was, even though it was mostly passing, it was just kind of methodically moving down the field, using the forward pass as you would a handoff.
Yes, and the fact that the running back Ozzie Nelson also ran the ball 26 times for 130 plus yards, and that was something, Bruce, that I don't want to say they struggled with. It just wasn't their identity earlier in the year. And so, yes, the opportunity to move the ball through the pass game, shorter passes, but to rely upon that offensive line, and quite frankly, sorry, Ian or whomever, but to be the better offensive line on that given night probably wasn't what people expected, with what all the fanfare coming in about Central Catholic's offensive line.
Yeah.
And too, I think, Sidwar did a great job. I mean, he was under duress too. I mean, when he was throwing the football, many times he didn't have a clean pocket, which was kind of new for him, I think.
Right. Right. No, I hear you. He's a terrific quarterback. I think Brett Gordon draws it up very well to get the ball out of his hands quickly. If those situations occur where you have an Ashton Blatt on the defensive line, who's terrific, by the way, and I know was banged up, and we talked about it on our broadcast, had a brace on his left arm, and so very similar to Abdul Carter in the national semifinal, where he would normally go up on the right side of the defensive line against the opponent's left tackle, based upon being dinged up and really having that one arm out of commission, was forced to play on the left side of the defensive line, the right side of the offensive line, and he didn't seem to miss a beat. So impressive. And like you said, Bruce, it was up to LaSalle to move the chess piece to get Brett, Brett what he needed to get to Gavin to run the offense, to get the ball out quickly.
Yeah, pretty amazing stuff.
Yeah, and I think, just looking back at the first matchup between these teams early in the year, that when that game started to swing, because it was kind of mired in a week zero, a bit of rust, right? Teams had some rust in the first half, but when LaSalle started running the ball in that first game was when things started to open up for their passing game, and I think we saw that a little bit here too. That Bob, you mentioned how close this game was with 5 minutes left in the first half, and even then, if Central comes out and gets a stop on either of those drives, it's still a one possession game, and things are going right back to where they were. That this was the kind of craziness of the last 4 minutes aside, this was a pretty close game between these teams, and like you said, Joey O'Brien sealed his legacy, with what he did at the end of the fourth quarter. But I do think that, I'm really interested to see how things progress the next few years, because Central's got a lot coming back now, right? Owen Herrick, their quarterback, was only a sophomore. Roman Thompson, who was their leading rusher and kind of star linebacker, who was also dinged up a little bit, also one of the top wrestlers in the state, he's only a junior. Chris Black, who I think only had 5 carries in the first game against LaSalle, really kind of became their go-to running back in the playoffs. And that dude's outstanding, and he's only a sophomore. So he's got 2 more years. And you've got some guys, on the defensive side of the ball and in the trenches who were underclassmen as well. Obviously, Ashton Blatt, Angelo Pugliano were both seniors, but some of the other guys they had on that defense were juniors and sophomores. So I think Central's going to have a lot coming back for next year. And I'm very interested to see between, what St. Joe's Prep has next year, what LaSalle has coming back, what Roman Catholic has moving up, kind of how 6A plays out over the next few years, because this Central team is going to be right back there next year. I mean, they were really good this year, but they've got a lot coming back next year too.
So let me ask you this then, Ian. I'm going to give you this. It's either a projected Pittsburgh Central Catholic versus either St. Joe's Prep, LaSalle, or Roman Catholic. Mm-hmm. I'll give you that or the field, or there's any other matchup next year in the 6A. What do you think?
I would probably take that. The only other question mark would be potentially if Bishop McDevitt does move up, a McDevitt Central Catholic semifinal, I think would be a really good game, because McDevitt had some young players this year too.
Yeah, they're still losing some guys though.
Yeah,
I would argue that they're losing some guys for next year. Not that Jeff Wechter can't make it happen, because he's an awesome coach, but I would handicap Central Catholic based upon what I see today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would take that as, Central versus one of the 3 Philly Catholic League teams. Versus the field. I would take that. I think I'd go with that.
That's a great question.
Yeah. That is a great question. By the way, just real quick, shout out to the guys from the WPIAL edition tuning in the chat. First, thanks for joining our show. At second, those guys are awesome.
We spent a lot of time together at getting warm.
Yeah, Michael and Corey and all those guys. I don't know how they do it. Like they manage a whole Facebook page, they've got Twitter stuff, and then they go out and film stuff they do sideline reporting. Those guys are great. Like they are awesome at what they do, and tremendous respect for everything they do. And thank you guys for tuning into our show on a Monday night. Appreciate all you do too. And I've always said, to everybody, I've said that, the more good information that's out there, the better. I'm not trying to compete and be better than anyone else. It's just, I'm trying to get good information out there, and I'm happy to help, cross promote anyone else because, there's not as many good news sources on high school football as there were. We had Hopewell's coach on, right? And he talked about
Yeah.
how, you used to have to wait for, in Beaver County, the Beaver County Times to come out on, what do you say, Sunday morning, because they didn't have a Saturday paper to just see what happened in the Friday night games. So
Yeah.
the more good information that people can put out there, the better. So really, really appreciate those guys at the WPIAL edition and all that they do, as well as some of our other friends of the show too.
Here. Yeah. I love all the content that comes out from you, Ian, from those guys that you mentioned. There's a lot of good content coming from the WPIAL. So us Eastern guys really appreciate it as well.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. All right. So just wrapping up 6A on the WPIAL side. My player of the year was Roman Thompson from Central Catholic for what he did on both sides of the ball, being their leading rusher and the key of the defense in the middle, leading the team in tackles, having a bunch of tackles for loss and sacks. Really, a lot of 6A this year, I felt like the top players were in the trenches, right? Lincoln Hoke from North Allegheny won the Bill Freilich Award for the top lineman in the WPIAL. Bob talked a lot about Ashton Blatt for Central Catholic edge rusher, who was just outstanding this season. Angelo Pugliano in the middle of Central's defense. Just had a dominant season on the inside. TJ Sabatucci from Cannon McMillan was a two-way tight end edge rusher. I think he's going to Buffalo. And then, two quarterbacks that made the list, Tristan Tavares from Norwin, who carried Norwin to their first playoff appearance in 7 years. And then Patrick Smith from Mount Lebanon, who was a 1,000 club member. But Central's defensive line, I think I may have forgotten a couple of players here too. But those guys, between Pugliano, Blatt, Colson Gatton on the edge, those guys were outstanding this year and really just dominated and controlled everybody they played. My WPIAL game of the year was the one that essentially got Norwin into the playoffs for the first time in 8 years. So Norwin had been kind of bottom feeder in 5A, then had to move up to 6A, struggled last year with a ton of injuries, and then finally everything clicked this year and they were able to make the playoffs. So a great storyline for Norwin getting into the playoffs. They had to put together a drive with 2 minutes left to go down and kick a game-winning field goal to beat Cannon Mac. That was in week 8 to clinch that playoff spot. So
another team with the WPIAL Blitz bump.
Yes, yeah. Actually, that was our only time we've ever interviewed a player. Yes, Josh Leonard from Norwin was awesome. We had reached out to their coach, and he was like, "Hey, I've got a sick kid. I've got to go, take him to Med Express. But talk to Josh. He'll do it for you." And he did our show and was awesome. So
yeah,
that was great. And then overall, our WPIAL Blitz awards, the team of the year is Avonworth, winning their first state title in school history. And our WPIAL player of the year is Luca Neal from Avonworth, who was absolutely outstanding on both sides of the ball, rushing, receiving, playing defense for Avonworth, and getting them their first state title, just the fourth WPIAL title in school history, first state championship. So congratulations to Coach John Core, the Avonworth community. And Luca Neal, fun story. There was a story in the Post-Gazette before the state championship game. His family owns a pizza shop. So he spends most of his week going out and delivering pizzas and helping them make pizza. And then is also the star player on their football team. So what an awesome story there. Had some of the usual suspects win WPIAL titles, Aliquippa winning their 21st, Clareton getting their 15th, Central getting their 10th. But then, Seton LaSalle winning their first one in 21 years, just the fourth title for Avonworth and the second for Peters Township overall.
Yeah, and our buddy Bob has got to take off. Any final words, Bob?
Oh, I didn't want to interrupt, but
no, that's okay.
Good. Yeah.
No, only to say I appreciate you guys very much. You guys do great work. Thanks for hanging in with me and letting me pop in. without video, sometimes on walks with the dog, sometimes on drives home. I just enjoy talking football, and my time to be able to do that is very, very limited. So I appreciate you guys very much, and keep fighting the good fight. And I can't wait till the next time we talk.
Take care, Bob. Thanks so much for joining us, and thanks for all your insights this year. You're welcome on the show anytime. Always
All right.
glad to have you.
Thanks, guys. See ya.
All right, see you, Bob. All right.
All right.
So,
So our state championship history, Southern Columbia winning their 15th, Clairton getting their 5th, but then some new names on the list too. LaSalle just getting their 2nd, Roman Catholic, Southern Lehigh and Avonworth their 1st state title in school history. So always cool to see those teams win their first championships. And the WPIAL still has a commanding lead, but now District 12 has moved into 2nd place on the all-time list of state championships, and District 4 with Southern Columbia representing right behind them, and District 11 is catching up to District 3 here, slowly now, having a champion last year with Northwestern Lehigh and a champion this year with Southern Lehigh.
Yeah, that's and District 3 really got to pick up the pace here. I'm gonna have to start championing that when I'm out and about, seeing these coaches say, hey, look, District 11, we can't let District 11 pass us by.
Yeah. I like that. I like that inter-district rivalry. That's very fun. Yes. All right. So finally, congratulations to our state champions, LaSalle, Roman Catholic, Southern Lehigh, Avonworth, Southern Columbia, and Clairton. Great seasons for all them. And yes, always good to see 2 or more WPIAL names on the list. Very, very happy that the WPIAL brought home a couple state titles there. So I teased this at the beginning of the show, that this was the 10th year of the 6 classification era. So I put together my list of the top 25 programs of the 6 classification era. I made a little formula to come up with it. Different things were worth different amounts of points, and then the teams with the most points were the highest ranked ones. So,
you understand that this is going to go viral on social media.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's okay.
So we're debuting it here tonight, with our top 25 teams of the 6 class era. And then I will also have, posts on steelcityblitz.com kind of running through everything as well. So, if people don't catch it here, they can also catch it later on. And yes, people may be upset with how the list goes. But
it's a formula.
It's it's for fun, right? So,
right. We have a long time till the next game.
We do have a long time. It's a long off season. Exactly. So we'll start with some honorable mentions here. So these were teams that did not make the top 25 list, but did win championships during the last decade. So I thought it would be helpful to have their overall record over the last decade too. Quaker Valley had that one really special season where they won the WPIAL and the state title, but didn't do a whole lot else during the decade. So they did not make the list. Union had that one special season where they were the WPIAL champions, coming from the number 10 seed, and then also the state runners up. South Fayette winning a WPIAL title. Same with West Allegheny. Seton LaSalle this year winning their only title of the decade, along with South Park last year. And so these teams, all very good programs, having memorable seasons within the last decade, but not quite enough.
Yeah, not the consistency needed to make the top 25.
Yes. All right, so let's get started here. We'll start with numbers 25 through 21.
Sarah Catholic, buddy.
At number 25, Sarah Catholic. The 2021 WPIAL champions, 8 playoff appearances, 1 conference title in the last decade. That Sarah Catholic defense under Coach Keem, who's now the head coach there. Tremendous respect for him. He's going to rebuild that program. They've had some tough years the last few years, but they're on the way back up. 8 playoff appearances in 10 years is really, really good. And so Sarah coming in at 25. Our Lady of the Sacred Heart at 24. They were the 2018 WPIAL champions, 9 playoff appearances and 2 conference titles in the last decade. Made it to 2 WPIAL championship games. They were also the runners-up to Bishop Canevin in 2021. North Catholic, my alma mater, at 23. They won over 75 games in the last decade, only made it to the championship game once, but had 9 playoff appearances and 5 conference titles. So did have that, very strong regular season consistency to get them to the postseason that got them into the top 25 list. Elizabeth Forward, surpassing 80 wins in the decade. They were the 2020 runners-up. That was their only championship game appearance in school history. 9 playoff appearances in 10 years, 6 conference titles. They've built a really good thing down there at Elizabeth Forward, have been very consistent in the regular season, have been upset in the playoffs a couple times by lower seeded teams, but still very deserving of being considered one of the top 25 teams. And then Bishop Canevin, the 2021 WPIAL champions, and then runners up in 2022 when they lost to Union. 7 playoff appearances and a conference title. Probably would have been more if they hadn't been in a conference with Fort Cherry the last couple of years, because those two years ago, that was the only team they lost to. They lost 2 games all year. It was the regular season to Fort Cherry and the semifinals to Fort Cherry. So, Canevin by geography kind of got the short end of the stick there, but have still been very good and very consistent over the last decade. All right, moving on to the top 20. At number 20 is Washington, the 2017 WPIAL champs and 2019 runners-up in 2A. Something to keep an eye on is they may be moving down to 1A this coming year. Their enrollment dropped a little bit, so keep an eye on that if they decide to play up or if they play in 1A. Washington making the playoffs all 10 seasons of the last decade, so that's a feat in and of itself, because that is not easy to do, winning 6 conference titles as well. Number 19, Fort Cherry, with that great run with Matt Sig. 75 wins over the decade, 2-time WPIAL champions, the state runners-up in 2023. A great career overall for Matt Sig. And, congratulations to Coach Tanner Gary there. He's been on the show a few times as well. And what he's been able to build there is something really special. And Matt Sieg's got a brother who's in 8th grade who's supposedly pretty darn good too. So Fort Cherry will be a good one to keep an eye on in the coming seasons as well.
Kind of like turning into like something like the Garcia family is to Southern Columbia,
Yeah. Mount Lebanon at number 18. They were probably, I think, the team in the top 25 that had the closest to 500 overall record, but 9 playoff appearances. Now, granted, I will say in 6A, with only a handful of teams, there weren't that many teams that made the playoffs, but it was a little easier sometimes than in other classifications. But still, 9 playoff appearances, the 1 conference title, which was also the year they won the WPIAL and state championship in 2021.
Wow, lightning in a bottle, baby.
Yeah, well, and that was a really good group of players. And if you've watched any Navy games this year, you've seen Alex Texa and Eli Heidenreich continue what they did at Mount Lebanon at Navy. So they're a very fun group to watch. So for those tuning into the Army Navy game this week, a little personal bias here for the Mount Lebanon kids of Alex Texa and Eli Heidenreich for Navy, who are both outstanding college players as well. Number 17 is McKeesport. They are the highest team on the list without a WPIAL championship, but 4 runners-up in 2016, and then each of the last 3 years made the playoffs all 10 seasons, 5 conference titles for the Tigers and their triple option running attack. So I got to think with Keemon Spell coming back next year, they're going to be among the favorites in 4A once again. So McKeesport coming in at number 17 overall on the list. Penn Hills at number 16. They were another team that had a really special season in 2018 when they won both the WPIAL and state championship in 5A. That was a great group of Penn Hills players that season. 7 playoff appearances and 4 conference titles overall. And really, since Pine Richland moved down from 6A to 5A in the middle of the decade, Penn Hills was the only team that challenged them in their conference. And Penn Hills did win a few of those conference titles, beating Pine Richland a couple times. So that is noteworthy for them. All right, the next group of 5, from 15 down to 11, Gateway at number 15, 2-time WPIAL champions, state runners-up back in 2017, 8 playoff appearances and 5 conference titles for the Gators. They've had a couple down seasons the last few years, but Gateway was always a strong contender throughout the decade. I have no doubt they'll be back very quickly. They had a freshman quarterback this year that had to step in due to injury and threw for a bunch of yards. So Gateway, it has always been a very consistent contender across the WPIAL and getting a couple championships under their belt here, which was, I think, the first time since like 1986 that they had won a WPIAL title. So Gateway did have a very good decade as well. Penn Trafford winning the first WPIAL and state championship in their school history in 2021.
Yeah, pretty amazing.
And yeah, but also, I mean, they won 86 games this decade, 9 playoff appearances, 4 conference titles. Yeah, they only had the one championship run, but they were a very, very consistent team, very strong program that they've built at Penn Trafford. And even this season, they only had 1 loss in the regular season after losing a bunch of players to graduation. And the way Coach Ruane out there has been able to just plug players back in, Penn Trafford has been excellent. Peters Township, I mentioned, they made the WPIAL championship game for the first time ever in 2019, and now have 2 WPIAL titles under their belt, 90 plus wins over the last decade, 93 and 29 overall. 2-time WPIAL champions, state runners up in 2023. So Peters Township is now, definitely should be considered among the blue blood and elite programs of the WPIAL after what they've done. I'll say in the last decade, but really it's been in the last like 7 years since 2019.
Yeah.
So they are,
on the up and up. I mean,
on the up and up, and definitely need to be considered among the top contenders and elite programs now. The University of North Allegheny comes in at number 12, two-time WPIAL champions, 90 plus wins over the decade. The state runners up in 2023, made it to 5 WPIAL championship games, 10 straight, more than 10. They've been in the playoffs like 25 years in a row, but made the playoffs all 10 years of this decade, 4 conference titles, and other than Mount Lebanon, have really been the only team that in the WPIAL Blitz show era, right, since 2020, have been the only team that's challenged Central Catholic at the top, other than the 1 year Mount Lebanon did. So North Allegheny coming in at number 12 overall. Number 11 is Beaver Falls, 3-time WPIAL champions and 2-time WPIAL runners-up. So they've been to 5 WPIAL championship games. They went on that run of when they moved from 3A down to 2A. They made the championship game 4 straight years in a row from 2020 to 2023. Then went winless in 2024, and then bounced back this year and made the playoffs, which was one of the great stories of going winless to getting back in the playoffs.
Yeah, that just doesn't happen very often, and
yeah,
but just an incredible turnaround.
Yep, absolutely. So, 5 WPIAL championship game appearances plus a state title in 2016. Beaver Falls at number 11. So now we get to the top 10 WPIAL programs of the last decade. So we're going to go one by one here. Number 10 is Jeanette, who played in 1A all 10 seasons of the decade, 9 playoff appearances, 2 conference titles, 5 semifinals, 3 championship games, and 2 WPIAL championships that they won in 2017 and 2020.
Now that's surprising.
Yeah, made it to, but both of those WPIAL championships turned into runs to the state title game, where they won it in 2017 and were the runners-up in 2020. So, getting deep into the state playoffs does help as well with my, rankings. So, 2-time WPIAL champions, 2 state title game appearances, 1 state championship. So Jeanette, the number 10 team in the WPIAL this decade. Number 9 is Steel Valley. They're 3-time WPIAL champions, but made it to 6 WPIAL title games in the decade. All 10 seasons played in 2A, won the 1 state title in 2016 with the Mercy Boys team that Mercy ruled every team they played, including Southern Columbia in the state championship game. So Steel Valley, the number 9 team with those 3 WPIAL titles and 1 state title. Number 8 is Bell Vernon. They were a very solid contender in 4A from 2016 to 2021, then moved down to 3A for 2 years and won back-to-back WPIAL and state championships those 2 seasons, moved back up to 4A in this cycle, and I believe will stay in 4A for the coming cycle as well. But Bell Vernon overall, even with the changes in classification, 9 playoff appearances, 5 conference titles, made it to 4 WPIAL championship games, along with those 2 WPIAL and state titles. And Coach Humbert was a good friend of the show too. Came on a
Regular,
few
yeah,
times.
regular
Yeah.
visitor there. We were sorry to see him go. That's for sure.
Yes, yes. And
Matt was
he's
the. I tell you what, there wasn't a more intense guy, and he had the hairdo to go along with the intensity. That's for sure.
yes, and he is still the athletic director there. But he's got some young kids, wants to spend time with
Yeah.
his family. Totally understand that as a father of many children myself. All right, number 7 is our 2025 state champions, the Clairton Bears. Clairton made 10 playoff appearances in getting to the playoffs every season, 8 conference titles, 8 semifinal appearances, 5 championship games, 3-time WPIAL champions, made it to 2 state title games, and then the state championship this year to cap it all off. So Clairton comes in at number 7 on the list. And just some outstanding players that have come through that Clairton program, and now these guys this year with Brandon Murphy, Jeff Thompson, Dante Wright, Michael Ruffin, all those guys, Dion Lovelace Pompey, getting to put their names alongside the Tyler Boyd, Titus Howard, Tarish Webb groups that won those state championships for Clairton back from 2009 to 2012. So this Clairton team was every bit as talented as some of those previous groups, and it's going to be exciting to see where they go moving forward because they do have some guys coming back too.
Yeah, and I thought you were singing "Twas the Night Before Christmas" there for a while. 10 playoff appearances, 8 conference titles, 5 championships.
Maybe I could do that for yeah.
We could do that for a lot of them, I'm sure, coming down the stretch here.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Avonworth coming in at number 6. Coach John Core, like we've talked about, has built their program up. They were in 2A for the first part of the decade, then moved up to 3A for the latter part, and really didn't miss a beat. The only time that they missed the playoffs actually was 2020 when was their first year in 3A, and somewhat controversially, I will say that was the year that the WPIAL said, because of COVID and all that, that was the year that the WPIAL said, okay, only the conference champions are guaranteed playoff spots, and beyond that, we're going to pick wild cards and who gets in. And Avonworth and I believe it was Mount Pleasant had very similar records, and the WPIAL opted to pick Mount Pleasant, and everyone I remember seemed to think that, not that it was a given that Avonworth was going to make it, but everyone seemed, pretty certain that Avonworth was going to get, one of those spots. So very, very interesting, choice there that the WPIAL made. But that was the only time Avonworth didn't make it, was when 2020, when the WPIAL committee left them out, despite what I will say pretty much everyone who was predicting playoffs at that time was thinking. So but that was their only miss. 3-time WPIAL champions, did it in both 2A and 3A, made it to 3 state championship games, including the cherry on top of it all, winning the state title this year.
Yeah, no, it was pretty incredible being on the field, when that happened. And like I said, a lot of great memories this year. And for me personally, one of them was being on the field with Avonworth winning.
Yeah. Yeah. And we did have a comment in the chat correcting me, actually, that Bell Vernon's enrollment for next year was 276 and the minimum for 4A is 282. So Bell Vernon actually will be moving back down to 3A. So didn't have that one on my.
I think that's my buddy Vince Rocco again.
Yes.
And he was probably really pleased that Sarah Catholic made the top 25 because his son quarterbacked them to the state championship appearance. Right. So
yes,
Max Rocco, man.
Yeah, that was a great team.
That was a story. That was a great story too. Vince and I used to work together, and I told Vince, I said, Vince, the first time that I want to see your son play football would be for a state championship. And you know what? It happened. I mean, the first time I saw him play was in the state title game. So just a crazy story, but my good buddy Vince Rocco there.
Yes. All right. So yeah, and Avonworth, Coach John Core, like we've talked about, and anytime you have to navigate a scenario like what Coach John Core did, where, not getting forced up because of, success, but just a growing enrollment and growing community, like that's not easy to do when, your team's moving up in classification because your community is growing. So Avonworth continuing to have some success, and really just awesome to see Coach John Core, his family, the community win that state title, and now be able to say not only are they, you know, three-time WPIAL champions in the decade, four times overall, but winning the state title as well. All right, number 5 is Central Valley, winning 90 plus games this decade. They also bounced between 3A and 4A. Started in 3A. They won 3 WPIAL titles in a row from 2019 to 2021, making the state championship game all 3 years, and 2-time state champions in 2020 and 2021. Some of the more dominant performances that we've seen on the defensive side of the ball when they just shut down Wyomissing's running game. But also, that 2019 state championship game, Central Valley was up 14-0 on Wyoming area, and Wyoming came back and won 21-14. So Central Valley was very close to being a 3-time state champion, but 5 championship games overall, 3-time WPIAL champions, 9 playoff appearances for Coach Lyons. Just a great job he's done with this Central Valley program. And let's not forget either that Central Valley just became a school in 2014. They were formed by a merger of Center and Monaca. So whenever you have a merger, right, like sometimes there's some things you got to kind of figure out. And Coach Lyons was able to navigate that, won a WPIAL title in their very first season, and carried it through to the 6th classification era and had a ton of success as well. So Central Valley, the number 5 program of the last decade. Number 4, do you want to take any guesses here at number 4, Bruce?
Yeah, I'm gonna go TJ.
Central Catholic. So Central
Okay.
Catholic coming in at number 4. 10 straight playoff appearances, 100 wins in a decade. In 6A for all 10 years, made it to 9 WPIAL championship games, won 5 WPIAL titles, and were runners up in the state 3 times in 2016, 2024, and 2025.
That's quite the impressive I don't want to say resume, but I mean just pretty incredible performances there.
Yeah. And Central Catholic is the highest ranked team on the list without a state title.
Ooh.
So yes. So not to spoil what's coming next, but next is TJ, who you picked.
Okay.
So played all, I'm sorry, that should say 4A, not 5A. So they played the whole decade in 4A. My bad. Sorry, 4A. I'm allowed 1 typo per show, right?
That's right.
Okay. So 10 straight playoff appearances for Coach Chirpak, 9 semifinal appearances, 6 championship games, 5 WPIAL titles, 2 state championships in 2019 and 2020. Thomas Jefferson is, just a behemoth in 4A. And they're actually moving up to 5A, which is probably why I typed it, because they're moving up to 5A next year, which is why I think one of the big stories to watch is, TJ moving up to 5A. But, for the last decade, Thomas Jefferson, they've made the playoffs every year since 1994, which is just an incredible, 31-year run of playoff appearances. And Coach Chirpak's done an awesome job there. He's won more WPIAL titles than any head coach, added 5 over the last decade, and 2 state titles to go along with it. So, all right, Bruce, who do you think is number 2?
Boy, good question here. We're gonna go. Jeez. Trying to think who we haven't mentioned yet.
Well, there are 2 left.
Yeah, I know. All right, tell me.
Number 2 is Pine Richland.
Okay.
So Pine Richland, over the last decade, started in 6A, moved down to 5A, 10 playoff appearances, 5 WPIAL championships, made it to 8 championship games in the last decade, made it to the semifinals all 10 seasons. Like, what? How incredible is that for one program? In 6A and 5A, 10 semifinal appearances over the decade, 8 championship game appearances, 5 titles across both classifications, winning 2 in 6A, 3 in 5A, multiple head coaches as well. Between Coach Casper and Coach Ladon there, both of them did great jobs, winning all 3 state championship games they played in. In 2017, they beat St. Joe's Prep in 6A, and then in 5A in 2020 and 2022, winning those title games as well. Between what Coach Casper did, beating Governor Mifflin in one of the most memorable games I think we've talked about and covered through this show.
Well, I was actually broadcasting that game too. I broadcasted that on NFHS network, so I know exactly. I mean, it was the wildest game, I don't know, in the pantheon of wild games that I've seen here.
Yeah. And of course, at the end of the day, like the Highlander, there can only be one.
That's
and
right.
That one
and
is
there they
Aliquippa,
are.
of course. 113 wins in the decade, right? 100, like, just think about that. 113 and 17 over 10 years. Like, just wild. And considering, they were in 3A and, full disclosure, right? Aliquippa was a 1A size school that opted to play up in 3A voluntarily, and then had enough success that the PIAA forced them higher into 4A, which was somewhat controversial because there was a bye in the state brackets then that the WPIAL 3A championship game happened, and the Aliquippa got a bye to the state, advanced in the state playoffs. And what happened to force them up actually was they had lost in a WPIAL championship game, and the PIAA said that it was because the WPIAL played their championship game a week early that loss counted for the next round of the state playoffs. So that loss gave them success points, which forced them up. So they're, controversially being forced up into 4A, but Aliquippa, as we know, will play anyone, anytime, anywhere, and never shrinks from a challenge. And Aliquippa just dominated 4A, as a 1A size school, had to take the state to court not to be forced up into 5A this past cycle. And so they won on the field and in the courtroom against the PIAA to be able to stay in 4A, which, like, to me, I totally understand. Like, you should not have to play more than 2 classifications higher than your enrollment. Like, at some point you get, way out of whack. This isn't basketball where you're only playing 5 players, right? Like, you've got to put 11 guys out on a football field, and to have to play 3 classifications or 4 classifications higher than your enrollment is just crazy. So I completely understand why Aliquippa should, and it was correct to keep them in 4A, absolutely, because of, everything that was involved with that. But Aliquippa continuing their amazing decade this year, with a WPIAL championship in 2025, making it to 4 state championship games, winning 3 of them between the 2018 win in 3A and then winning in 2021 and 2023 in 4A. Coach Warfield has done an amazing job with the Quips, and just everything that goes into this program is just incredible. 10 playoff appearances in a decade, 10 semifinal appearances, 9 championship games. Before they missed the WPIAL championship game in 2024 last year, and that was the first time in 16 years they didn't make a WPIAL championship game, which, like, and that goes back to playing in AA, right? They were playing in AA in the 4-class era, and then 3A and 4A. Kept moving up and kept making title games, and just an incredible decade for Aliquippa. So that yes.
Yeah, no, I mean, with the odds stacked against them, they achieved greatness despite that.
Yes, absolutely. So Aliquippa, of course, is our number 1 school of the last decade. So I hope folks enjoyed my run through of the top 25 programs. I'll have some wrap-up articles on steelcityblitz.com. So just some realignment notes as well, since we talked about this is a realignment year. 6A, no changes unless Butler decides to come back into the WPIAL. we'll see if that happens, but probably going to be the same 7 teams. In 5A, looking like 19 teams with Thomas Jefferson, Trinity, and West Allegheny moving up from 4A. So that's definitely going to be a storyline to keep an eye on, of Thomas Jefferson now having to play against potentially some of their other either South Hills rivals or some of the Eastern teams, depending on where they get placed. But it could be Thomas Jefferson being in a conference now with either the Peters Townships, Upper St. Clairs, Bethel Parks of the world, or they could get in the Eastern Conference with like Woodland Hills and Penn Trafford and Gateway and those schools. So either way, going to be some really good marquee matchups for Thomas Jefferson now moving up to 5A. And then Kiski, Shaler, and South Fayette all moving down from 5A to 4A. And let's not forget, before South Fayette had moved up to 5A midway through the decade, they had just dominated 4A. So that's definitely one to keep an eye on, along with Central Valley moving up from 3A to 4A as well. So 4A is going to get a lot more competitive next year, with South Fayette moving down and Central Valley moving up. So for Aliquippa and McKeesport, it's going to get real interesting, with these other teams joining 4A.
And
go ahead.
And looking at the breakdown here too, the WPIAL is in the same boat in the 3A and 1A that District 1 is with 6A and 5A, is that you're only getting one representative coming out of the WPIAL for those classifications with the large amount of schools. And I just don't think that that's fair. I mean, if District 3 gets like a 1A champion moving on to the PIAA for 2 teams, and only with 29 teams, the WPIAL gets only one team moving on. I think that's a little bit unfair, and maybe in certain circumstances that the WPIAL or the PIAA should consider at-large teams. I've talked about that a number of times with districts that just have a lot of teams in a certain classification, that it should be done not just one team per classification, but maybe one team for up to 24 or something. I don't know, but something that to get some of the a better representation of these schools to be able to move on.
Yeah, and I think it's really hard in football because you can only play one game a week. Like in basketball, it becomes a little easier to, you have your district championships, and then a certain number of teams move into the state bracket, but you can play multiple basketball games in a week, whereas you can only play one football game a week. So, it does get challenging just from a scheduling and timeline standpoint. But I totally understand your point about, potentially considering, like, let's not have buys in the state playoffs. Let's have more teams in.
Yeah, right. We talked about that before too. So
yeah. So in 3A, which you mentioned, there's going to be a ton of teams. This is somewhat dependent on, Amani Christian was a 1A size school that opted voluntarily to play up in 3A this past cycle, won 2 conference championships, 2 undefeated.
They may opt to play up in 4A.
They may. There's going to be fewer teams there, right?
Right.
We'll see what Amani decides.
Fewer heavyweights in 4A than 3A.
Yeah. So we'll see what Amani decides to do there. Ulsh initially, with their numbers on the initial statewide enrollment list, would have been a 3A school, but I know they have a couple co-ops in there. So I kind of heard a rumor that Ulsh might drop one of their co-ops and stay in 2A where they've been. So we'll see where they land. But I think of note, Bell Vernon moving down from 4A to 3A, along with Ambridge, Knock, and West Mifflin. And then Beaver Falls, Elwood City, South Park, and Waynesburg moving up. So you've got this like confluence of 3A is not losing a lot of teams, right? Central Valley's moving up, McGuffey's moving down. So 3A is only losing 2 teams. And you've got 8 teams moving in. So 3A is going to be gigantic in the WPIAL, the next cycle. 2A is going to lose some teams with, those ones moving up to 3A, but McGuffey, which good for them because McGuffey was a consistent contender for, conference titles in 2A, had to move up to 3A this past cycle and didn't win a single game. So, hopefully it's good for McGuffey to be able to move down and start to rebuild their program a little bit. So we'll see where McGuffey lands. Chartiers Houston and Neshannock both moving up from 1A to
1A.
2A. So both of those were playoff teams this year. Both of them won first round playoff games. Chartiers Houston winning a playoff game for the first time since 2000 this year. So they're both moving up to 2A. And then I think the big one to watch is Washington moving down from 2A to 1A after how good they've been over the last decade in 2A. It'll be interesting to see if Washington decides to stay in 1A or if they'll voluntarily play up in 2A with some of their more, traditional rivals that they've had. So overall, we still don't have WPIAL conferences. We don't know how the state success formula is going to factor in for some of the teams outside the WPIAL. So I didn't include any statewide teams on here as far as who is moving up and down because we still have a couple things to see there. But just from the initial breakdown of who's moving up and down based on enrollment, this is what we've got. And I think schools have until sometime here in early December to declare whether or not they're going to play up. So we'll have more information forthcoming. Stay tuned to my Twitter account, WPIAL_Blitz, and SteelCityBlitz.com, where I'll have articles about realignment as well. And I see some comments in the chat as well about people mentioning about the enrollment size. The numbers folks in the chat are citing are correct for this cycle. But when I said Amani was a 1A size school, that was their numbers for last cycle. But for this coming cycle, you're correct. They are 2A as well as Aliquippa had been 1A when they got a 1A size school when they got forced up to 4A. The last cycle they had a 2A size enrollment and have a 2A size enrollment again for this coming cycle.
The chat has been on fire.
Yes, the chat is correct about everything. All right, so just in conclusion, as we wrap up the year here on the WPIAL Blitz Show, wanted to take a moment to say thanks to all of our friends of the show, our friends at PA Football History, with have provided us some great historical information. Patrick dropped by last week for our state championship preview show. He does a fantastic job with everything there. His state championship record book is awesome. He just updated that with all the stats from the games that just happened. Our friends at the KDKA high school football broadcasts as well, what they do on the radio. Carlo at WPIAL Insider had me on his season preview show, as well as he and I did a KDKA postgame show this year. So Carlo does a great job. He is putting on a camp that's coming up for college coaches to come see some uncommitted WPIAL kids. So Carlo does a great job in the off season too, just doing his best to promote all of the players in the WPIAL, trying to get them eyes from college coaches and things like that. So Carlo's great. Thanks to our friend Chris at END 2008 on Twitter. He makes all the helmet graphics and everything else that we use and pretty much everyone else uses. But we couldn't do this without him, right? Like I said at the beginning of the show we're here to be entertaining and informative, but part of the way we're informative on this show is being able to show things graphically, whether it be standings or playoff races or whatever else. And Chris's graphics help us do that. So we couldn't do this without Chris. Tremendously thankful for everything he does. My friend Brian at WMBS out of Uniontown, I do a weekly radio spot there on their pregame show. So thanks to Brian for his continued support and having me on. Our friends at the Lawrence County Sports Network, James Dotson's been on the show a few times.
Yeah, I got to meet James in person.
Yeah, he's great. He's awesome.
He mentioned, he said, it's nice to see you in person. You're not out on your deck. So
Yep.
Thanks to James. He's been a big supporter of ours.
Yes, absolutely. And finally, Dave Micah and the EasternPAFootball.com folks, and Bob Long, who dropped by this evening. Bob does both LaSalle football, Philly Catholic League football, as well as basketball stuff. So I do not do basketball, but for those interested in basketball and, Philly Catholic League basketball info, stay tuned to Bob Long and his Twitter account and everything, because I know he does a lot for basketball as well.
He sure does.
Thanks to all of our friends of the show who have supported us throughout the year and, given me opportunities to just come talk high school football, because I absolutely love it. And if you enjoy listening to me talk, while this is our last WPIAL Blitz show of the year, you can check out me talking and saying many four-letter words about the Steelers on the Steel City Blitz podcast. Probably not as many this week after they beat the Ravens, so feeling pretty good about it now, but we're very honest. Not a show for kids, is definitely a show for adults. We have a few drinks and say some swear words, but it's a good time. Thursday nights on YouTube, 10 p.m. Check it out on the Steel City Blitz podcast channel. We have a live chat just like this show. So, if you like listening to me talk football, want to hear me talk about the Steelers, feel free to tune in, subscribe. It's on every major platform for the Steel City Blitz podcast. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all that. But our live streams on YouTube and the live chat's a lot of fun. So tune into that if you want to hear more. And thanks to everyone for tuning in this season. Really appreciate everyone who has watched the show, commented, shared links, all that stuff, read articles, interacted with us on social media. Congratulations to our state champions. And thanks to you, Bruce, for continuing to do this with me. You're the one who produces the show and gets it out there. So really appreciative for just, the opportunity to talk football once a week.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a labor of love for us. I mean, I sit back and think about, how we got together, to just, hey, let's like do this show. I wanted to learn about the WPIAL and went to the guy that I thought, and knew the most, and look where it's taken us, through all these years and all these friends, and that became very apparent, this weekend too, for all the people that had such kind words about the show and that. So it's a very humbling, and I want to thank obviously you, Ian, for everything you do. A great friend that you are, and I think we're building a kind of a great network here of between this show and Eastern PA football and Bob and Lawrence County. And that was one of the things that the WPIAL edition guys and I talked about were the importance that the media has in setting the tone for high school sports coverage, that everybody needs to get along, everybody needs to have one common goal, which is to promote these players and teams and coaches, and not park your ego at the door, because it's not about you, it's about all these kids and teams, and what we're here to do is just be the conduit to pass the information to the fans. And I think if you look at it that way, I think what we do is very noble.
Yeah, and like we've always said, we're here to try and tell good stories and highlight good stories. And at the end of the day, it's all about the kids that are playing, and I would argue it's about their communities too, because it takes a community to have a football team, right? It's not just the kids on the field, it's the coaching staffs, it's their families driving them to practice, getting them to games, the parents and boosters that cook dinner for kids before games, all the community support that goes into it. So and I love that kind of stuff, right? Like I talked about going to the Fort Cherry game this year and, sitting behind one of the players' grandparents and like talking to them, and they're like, oh, we went to Fort Cherry back in the day. And I was talking about the community and how great that was. So I do love, just the community stories that go into high school football. And, but you're right. At the end of the day, like I said earlier in the show, the more good information that's out there, the better, because I'm one guy with 7 kids doing this in my free time, right? that is, and I can't cover everything, right? I can't be at every game. I can't, I catch all the scores, but I'm going to miss storylines. I'm going to miss things throughout the year. But that's why it's good to have more people doing it, that the more people that are putting information out there, the better, because more of those stories get told and more of those kids get highlighted. And I think that's the great thing about kind of what's happening right now, especially in the WPIAL, that, you've had the Post-Gazette now only publishes an actual newspaper 2 days a week. They have an online edition every day, but only 2 days a week, right? The Trib is all online now. And yes, that's the way media is going, that there's not as much in print material. But if people are going online to find things, there's a whole plethora of resources that, between what WPIAL Insider does, what the WPIAL Edition guys do, the small little bit that I do. I brag and say I have the best WPIAL standings page on the internet because I'm the only one that has all the tiebreakers. but like it's not like any one person, like, okay, I have my standings page, but like other people are writing games of the week articles that are better than mine, right? But I still do it because I like to think like, hey, if I can put something out there and, highlight 3 kids from each team and, get a little bit of information out there. If people read mine, if people read somebody else's, if people read everything, that's great. And the more that gets highlighted, the better. So, I'm all for, cross promoting. Oh, the other guy I didn't mention was John from PA Today Sports.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, John has done an awesome job, over the last few years building up his stuff as well.
Yeah.
And he's brought a couple of guys on board that really took, his content to the next level too. I remember the first year when we had him on our show, and I was amazed by just how much work he was putting in, because when I saw all the content he was putting out, I was like, he has to have like 2 or 3 people doing this. He's like, no, it's all me. I'm like, how are you putting out this
How
much
do you do
content?
that?
Like,
Sure.
but having these people that just love high school football and being able to highlight all these great stories, between, like I said, John at PA Today Sports, the WPIAL Edition guys, us, the WPIAL Insider, the KDKA weekly radio broadcasts, and then, what gets on TV ultimately, there's a game of the week on TV, the, sports highlights on the news and all that, but people care about it. And the more information we can get out there, the better for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, I guess that's it. That is it. That's very painful to sign off, but it's not like we're going away. We still have our Instagrams and Twitters and what have you. My ugly mug will be plastered all over games that I'll be broadcasting for Penn Live throughout the rest of the year for basketball and all kind of sports. So don't forget about us over at Penn Live. I'm sure that we'll be doing some PIAA games as well. But for my buddy Ian McMeans, hey, listen, I'm Bruce Batchley. Listen, thank you for watching the WPAL Blitz Show podcast. That does it for 2025. See you next year.